So when we started this process in the spring of this year, and you all had tremendous input and it was very, very great feedback from all of the council members, and you initially expressed desire that the time is of the essence and you wanted to have something accomplished. So we certainly moved this along quite speedily. And Mr. Robertson were really the main. I think this one's not on either, Todd. So let's turn it on. Here we go. I want to give you the timeline here. It's hard to believe, but we started April 8th. It was triggered by a number of reports on the media with regards of drone pictures and some storm events, which were in March of this year. I actually had an opportunity to go back to that particular presentation by the Conservation District, and I looked at the results of that and what was recommended at that point. And the district said three things they really could see: enforce our as well as the state's regulations to their fullest extent, adopt more stringent county regulation, or request NREC that they would reopen the Regulatory Advisory Committee for the stormwater regulations. So, first of all, you came back to the engineering department and said, give you all the options we have, the broad spectrum of options. And you remember it was quite a range of options we had considered. So that was all possible. All these possibilities were reviewed on July 15th. That same presentation, Councilmember McCarron and I attended the district board meeting, and we presented the exact same wide range of options to the board members so they could see all the things you were looking at. After that, we had individual meetings in the engineering department with all of you except the president, who just let the council members meet with us individually, and you gave us some feedback on each one of these items. And based on that feedback, we came back in August on the 19th and met with you and said, these are the limited options where we could clearly see that there's support from a majority of the council members who have individually expressed which ones they were most interested in. So ranking them, this was then the one we would use as the draft ordinance basis. Then we came back in October after Mr. Robertson and I worked together on making a limited ordinance which covered these items and brought them before you, again, spoke through the whole reason why they're in there and where they came from, and asked for you to introduce the ordinance. So that was that was in October. We had an opportunity to appear before the Sussex Conservation District's advisory board early November, which is a much larger group, fairly diverse. A lot of comments were collected at that point. At that point, I also had a number of feedback loops between the engineering community and myself. And when we presented, Mr. Robertson and I came back before Planning and Zoning on the 19th of last month, and we actually came to the board with a recommended staff amendment list, which we incorporated in one motion for the board to adopt if they felt like it. And that became part of the public record. I have since then looked at a number of the comments which were submitted to the county council and the department, and a number of them, I believe, do not realize the package of amendments the two of us had proposed to the Planning Commission. So, and that included some of the comments from the district as well as from ACEC and from the Development Council. So just saying that for the record so everybody knows, we, staff, already made a recommendation to the Planning Commission. So once they vote on it, maybe as early as tomorrow, it could come before you with that recommendation. So we're moving forward, and I'll I'll tee this up, but I'm turning it right over. So when we started, we looked at, we should be doing something which does not require other entities to have agreements with the county council and or changes to their laws or regulations. Mr. Robertson, please.
So Mr. Medlars put this slide together based on information that we had provided, because there was a question about whether this was inconsistent with exclusive jurisdiction given to SCD or DNREC. We looked at that, and as the slide indicates, we don't believe there's any conflict in terms of the ordinance. SCD's jurisdiction falls under DNREC's code provisions. And DNREC's stated policy in its code is to work regarding sediment and stormwater runoff is to work in cooperation with the county and others. Again, there's no exclusive jurisdiction that flows to SCD in Delaware code, particularly with regard to this issue. And the policy that is set forth in Delaware code, again, implies coordination with the county. This ordinance is not inconsistent with anything that SCD does or DNREC does. Again, so it's not contrary to DNREC's objective. Again, the ordinance is meant to enhance and not to limit the state's stated obligations. So, fairly straightforward, hopefully.
Yeah, based on your research.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's
right. Thank you. You're welcome. So how I teed it up is so the public can again see what you looked at on August 19th, and only the slides where you said, on that during that meeting in August, include that particular topic in the draft ordinance. Only that got moved forward. So that was the slide you saw. You said, yes, this particular point, we'd like to have an enhanced capture. Remember, that is where we make a selection based on certain site conditions. And these are existing site conditions before anything is engineered. So that was drafted. And what you see here is the ordinance as you've seen it introduced with the changes recommended to the Planning Commission. So that's important to note. And the major change here, there's a couple of changes which are sort of like very technical by some of the engineers about how the subcatchment areas should be looked at individually versus as a whole, and how we would define the site boundary of the subcatchment versus the site. So these were technical changes, but the main change was the district asked for that to be a recommendation, and they would, advance the protection. And the county engineering department does not have the underlying desire to not make it a recommendation. So now this is not limiting, this is enhancing. So now we will recommend to the district, and now they will be the responsible party for trying to implement an enhanced capture. So there's no objection by the engineering department, never has been. So that is before, as I said, planning zoning could, as early as tomorrow, tell you that should be what it should look like. I'm moving on to the next one. There was a lot of angst about the black box. So I just made a copy of the first page. I brought a number of the other 10 pages. So I have them with me here. Anybody who wants to have the code, they can take it home today. And you have to read it to see where the limitations are, but it's, I can do it, so I'm sure some colleagues in this room can do it too. So full script will be available. Now, on the other hand, is a number of entities, including the district, have sent me data to run through. It was always the objective I had envisioned it would be a 10 to 15% capture. Strangely enough, the 20 we tested, 3 triggered the capture. So it is in that range, but is 20 enough of a sample? Some people may agree, some people may disagree. So now people can look at the code and say, hey, we want this changed or that changed to reduce the capture further or to enhance the capture more. But since it's just a recommendation, we can turn the whole code over to the district, and they can play with it, because at that point, like, the only thing you would have to come back then is that if the district wanted to make changes, it would have to flow back to you for modification, because it becomes part of the county code. Did I say that right? Okay. Next step up was the limit of disturbance. There was some discussion at the advisory committee at the district, why not other scientific parameters would flow into that? Why only 2? Why not, for example, soil conditions? Why not, like water tables? I mean, there's a number of things you can bring into it. But so, hey, we're ready to entertain. If somebody wants to bring different tables forward and you feel that they're more appropriate, this is a starting point which allows us, based on these 2 most important criteria, upstream area and slope of that is bare earth topography. Remember, the initial one deals with the existing topography before you start modeling, and the other one is you have now regraded 20 acres, and this is your slope. So this is why this is different than the other one. But these, again, site conditions, only here you can control it by design. The other one, they're sort of given to you. That's what you authorized, and this is what we put in code. And there was no proposed modifications to that. So this is what ended up being in the code with the table. And if this is adopted, then we have limits of disturbance which are reduced for. And again, we would be transmitting that to the district to be incorporated in the district's approval process. Now, I added this because this is very important. In this whole process, we learned something. And that has to do with the phasing. I call it the phasing challenge. We look at grading plans, but we also look at subdivision layouts for roads, emergencies, emergency access vehicles. We're looking at outlet entrance placements. We're looking at water system connections. We're looking at sewer pump stations. We're looking at all of these different things which play into how the engineers decide how to phase a county project. The district looks at it with a very singular focus. They're looking at it from an earth-moving standpoint, bare earth, 20 acres. How can we put this into a sequence? So what we've learned is, probably more often than we like it, the sequences and the phasing is not in sync. So if there's something to be learned, there's an unintended consequence, and that is we end up with more than 20 acres of bare earth at a given time. So how can we correct it? I think we have to have better coordination at the plan approval so the 2 phasing plans are in sync and get mutually enforced. So that's why I said site inspections on the one hand, approval on the other. So for no other reason than that, this year was probably a worthwhile exercise. So certainly learned a lot about this, but I think we, the county engineering department, as well as the district, learned here. There's an opportunity where we can be better. And so I wanted to make sure that you know about this, we're all aware of it, and we're working towards a more, let's say, cohesive land development future on the grading side.
Just a clarification, how steep is a 3% grade? I'm trying to picture that in my head. How steep a slope is that?
It's pretty, I mean, like...
Pretty steep or...
It's pretty steep, yes. It's 3 feet and 100 feet, so it's...
3 out of 100.
You can notice it, yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's not a lot of places in Sussex County that are probably more than that.
And you remember, it's over 100 feet, so right. you have modulation in the terrain, especially as you approach banks of streams, which are steeper than 3%.
Right.
But it's not over 100 feet.
And of course, that's where we're seeing,
Yes.
you know, and what really sparked all this, I mean, it really started back in '24, if not sooner than that, with a series of rainstorms and, you know, calls to the Conservation District, it seemed like every week, you know, and, you know, numerous repeated spillage of sediment into waterways. And, you know, and then, of course, the thing that really triggered it was last spring. And, we finally began to take action. So, and it was along a very steep slope of a stream.
And Commissioner Riley, you may recall some of the change orders I presented to you to the county's grading project at Inland Bays. We had slopes of less than 3%, but we had large upstream areas of bare earth.
Right.
And we sure did spend a lot of money to protect, you know, like that particular waterway. And
You're talking about down for the inland plants.
yeah, because Guinea Creek, remember, we had discharged it into Guinea Creek.
Yeah.
And despite our best efforts,
We spent a lot of money.
we spent a lot of money. And one time it overwhelmed all of our defenses.
It did.
That's when it took out Cannon Road.
Right.
So, I mean, so we all understand the comments we hear. You will hear from the public. You cannot prevent all sediment
I don't think
leaving the
that's the
site.
proposition here, is it?
And I think there's no disagreement with that statement.
Right.
And we learned it the hard way.
Yeah.
But you also took off the table. At one time, we had take all the silt fence off and replace it with living walls. And you said, no, we did that. But you did not feel that this is appropriate to ask the public to do that. That should be stated as well.
Yeah, we could have gone much farther.
You could have gone much, much further. Yes. But I thought it's a worthwhile slide to put in this presentation because that's really speaks to the subject matter.
Yeah.
So here's the ever so dreaded table with, you know, like, is there some real science behind it? No, there's other parameters which affect it, but I thought it's a good starting point for discussion. So, again, you saw the volume control at property lines, and these are overland discharges at property lines. We received a number of comments, including from our friends from the engineering community, which did not carefully read what we're proposing, because that had been considered once by DNRC volume control. But they were going to apply it to all discharges for all calculations. We said from the get-go, that is for overland flow at property lines. So that means if you're discharging onto your neighbor overland, not in a drainage feature, such as a tax ditch, you should be held to the quantity, i.e. the volume. And I stand behind it. I think you still stand behind it. We, Mr. Vincent, Mr. Robertson, crafted it in such a way that, you know, that's what it applies for. So the engineering community, this is actually came from two of the engineering companies, these two different ones, that we wanted further clarified. So we added in the form of overland flow, and we said none of the managed offsite discharges onto. So that means if you have this applies to unmanaged discharges which exist as they exist today, and they will be unmanaged in the future. They are not covered by that. If you have a piece of wooded forest draining on your neighbor and you do not touch that piece, we never intended to stop that. So that single word managed included that. So these are the corrections. I mean, these are good technical changes. That's before the Planning Commission in their package. In that same vein, the existing code already says exactly that, but it says it in an undefined word. Right now, shall not result in increased quantities. So since, and I don't know who found it actually, you or I, but we don't have a definition of quantity, so we stuck the volume in there, and instead of the area to be developed, tied it again back to the subdivision development because it only regulates residential developments. So this is just a clarification of the existing code. Last not least, we felt that all these items needed to be communicated at the very early stage. In other words, the preliminary conference, that is the planning instrument or the planning meeting, which happens when you just go over the broadest thing. This is at the same level when you, before you go to the plus process, you should come to the planning and zoning department and go over the preliminary conference. Mr. Whitehouse, would you say this is very early in the steps?
First thing you have to do before you apply.
First, okay. Thank you for the confirmation. So that, we put this in code. The only change here is, as requested by the district, the capture, the enhanced capture becomes a recommendation to be implemented by the district versus reviewed by us. So
Right.
everything else is like,
The goal is you can't flood out your neighbor because of actions you're undertaking on your own.
yes, we did not change that. No, that is the volume control at a very defined incident. It is managed flow over land discharging onto a property line, not in a drainage feature.
Right.
That is probably 1 out of 20 where that applies. That's sort of like where I would pick it. I'm sure I'll hear, we'll get different opinions, but I would say it's a very small percentage. Yeah. So the other one is completely in our code, does not touch any of the stormwater regulations. That has to do with the buffer and the ability to modify the B buffer in such a way that we place it in the environmentally most endangered section, most possibly compromised section. And that, when you look at the Walden example, that is the prime example. All the flow of the entire subdivision construction concentrated in one area. Right. So if we had that by itself, it probably would have resulted in a significant reduction of the sedimentation. I think that's the poster child example, and that's what I like to use. Now we have looked at it does take away some of the design flexibility, but it does significantly enhance the environmental protection. So I believe it's a trade-off, and that's a trade-off for you to decide. I'm fully aware of the one side, and I understand you have to make that decision. So the code's pretty simple. It just changes it that it shall be utilized. We make the decision where it goes, and you cannot put stormwater management BMPs in the buffer anymore. So these are the two, they go hand in hand. If you look at Creekview, you remember Creekview, Ms. Greenbaum? That was another prime example where actually you, through your conditions of approval, essentially did the same thing what we're proposing here today. Very, very tricky here, the schedule. There's a couple of things I'd like to point out. We have on the table an SAD extension request of 6 months. Initially, you had said you'd like to have it effective upon adoption for projects not yet at the preliminary conference level. SAD suggested to create a link between the effective date and the written approval by DNRC. And I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Robertson, because that is something I don't think we've ever had that request, and I think he wants to maybe make a couple of comments on how we should or shouldn't link our approvals with others.
Well, so this is the first that I'd heard of the linkage, but I would say generally, I'm reluctant to say that we link effective dates of our ordinances to third-party steps, just because that can either delay or speed up or what. It just doesn't rationally relate to what we do. So, I would rather us say it's either effective on adoption or effective for plans that have not had a preliminary conference, or some other definite trigger date that we're more in control of. That's all. And that's not to say that the effective date of written approval by DNREC is important. It's just more it's a defined date that we know when and how it would be determined.
So I guess you're saying to move forward with it, and in the spirit of working with the Conservation District when they asked for 6 months, I mean, they have concerns that this action erodes the authorities delegated to the Sussex Conservation District under the Delaware Sediment and Stormwater regulations, and they also have some questions related to DNREC. I think they're asking for time to make sure that the language is clear, that we're not overstepping each other's bounds, and that seems appropriate given our working relationship, and we are, this does involve more than just the county.
Yeah, no, I don't know that we really have any objection to that.
Okay.
So, no.
I misinterpreted that,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I was talking about more the effective date. In terms of, if more discussions and coordination and cooperation can happen, I think will result in a better end product anyway. That way we know we're both reading the same sheet music.
I'm favorable toward coordination and working well with our colleagues. 6 months strikes me as a pretty significant amount of time when this has been going on since April. And I know you've had more than one conference with SCD, so I'm curious as to the 6-month time frame. It just seems like a
That was the
delay.
amount they requested, but
Yes, we
can
did
certainly-
not suggest, that was a request.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, I know.
but yes, we did have conversations with DNRC, and DNRC was present at the board meeting, and they're also present at the advisory group. So
Can you comment on why 6 months? I mean, that's a long period of time.
I have,
And it's not like this just cropped up yesterday. So, I mean,
They're here.
I think they're going to be here to answer that, but
are they? Sorry.
They're here.
as a board member, I attend some of these meetings, and there's just more than a few people. It has to be coordinated with different groups inside that agency. So it's not that a small group of people is sitting around saying, well, let's talk about it for 6 more months. Just like us and our different organizations, they've got to run it past lawyers, past different committees. And I think in meetings I sat in with 6 months, it is believed that it could be done before 6 months. They can certainly speak on that in public comment, but 6 months was probably longer than what is needed, but would provide ample time.
Okay, thank you.
I have no further.
Are there any more questions?
Thank you for all your work. I mean, it's
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Hans.
a push up to get it done.
A lot of science.
Well, if there are no other questions, then now would be the time for any member of the public that would like to comment.
And I'd like to comment and say thank you, council, for giving me the opportunity to have a lot of fun last year.
Hans loves a challenge.
Mr. Byard, come forward, please.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
David Baird with the Sussex Conservation District, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to comment. And I won't be up here very long, but I do want to reiterate some of the points that were made by Mr. Medlars and Mr. Robertson, as well as Mr. McCarron in the earlier discussion. And I thought that the timeline that was displayed earlier was certainly right on the money. A number of conversations have been taking place, and there's been a lot of heavy lifting done to get us to where we are. And, on behalf of the district board, I certainly appreciate the comments and effort that's been made by the county to get us to this point, because you certainly heard the message we were delivering and have taken action to move it forward. So with that being said, I know there was a significant question about the 6 months requested. As Mr. McCarron said, that wasn't a drop dead. It was just a date to put a timeline out there to say, look, this can easily be wrapped up in 6 months, more than likely less than 6 months. The district is committed to doing that, and we're committed to putting any resources towards moving it forward just as fast as possible. I think the biggest thing that, at least from the district's aspect, as far as